Welcome to the best of first-person episodes from Phantoms and Monsters. Please like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you'll be notified of all future uploads.
Grandpa Parker and the Hairy Man. I've been reading so many theories about Bigfoot. To me, it's somewhat comical. I believe that certain people are allowed to witness these creatures, in particular those people who have traditionally lived among them. I'm not sure what other people are seeing. My family has lived in Jackson County, North Carolina for as long as anyone can remember. We are Cherokee. There are stories of stone men or hairy savages seen by our people historically throughout the coal boundary. I have a story told to me by my grandfather when I was a boy. Grandpa Parker talked about the large garden and cornfields his parents maintained. They would grow heirloom bean and tomato varieties that came from hundreds of years in Cherokee culture. They kept a few field animals, but at that time, they didn't raise livestock. After a while, his parents decided that they would try raising chickens. He helped his father build a large chicken house, and another small barn that would be used as a workshop. Everything went well, and after a few years, their flock of egg-laying hens were prospering. His father was also a very good handyman and fixed equipment for other farmers in the area. One day, just before the harvest season, Grandpa Parker and his father went hunting in the woods west of the farm. Their main quarry was squirreled that day. As they reached their regular spot along a ridge thick with hickory trees, his father looked worried. They rarely talked or made any noise while in the woods, but his father suddenly started to whistle in a long sustained tone. They sat quietly on the boulder for a few minutes, until his father once again let out a long whistle. "We need to move," his father abruptly said. They got up and started to briskly walk on the trail towards the farm. When they reached the end of the woods, they heard a loud whistle coming from the direction where they came. They cut through the cornfield and quickly reached the workshop. Grandpa Parker was becoming worried. His father didn't say anything, just directing him to stay with him. His mother was in the garden working, when his father shouted out to her to go to the house. They all met at the door by the kitchen and went inside. He and his father sat at the table while his mother cooked coffee. "Why did we leave the woods?" His father looked at him and asked if he had ever heard anyone talk about the hairy man. Grandpa Parker told him that he had not. He was scared now. "My great-grandfather said that the hairy man was a tall, hairy human-like creature that would migrate to different locations along the mountains following food sources. When they were in the woods, he had noticed that there were no birds or other natural sounds as they approached the ridge. He said that he noticed something large in the hollow, much larger than a black bear, and walking like a man. He whistled hoping it would move on, but he didn't notice it move or make any sound. From his experience, that was an indication that it was time to leave because the bear man was staying put. The return whistle they heard was a warning to stay out of the woods. When my great-grandfather was younger, a woman and her young boy went missing in a woodland in nearby Swain County, North Carolina. People had seen a hairy man in the area, and suspected that it was responsible for the disappearance. There had been other disappearances previous to that. No remains were ever found. The next day, his father decided to start harvesting corn. This year, a large patch of cornfield nearest to the woods was left unharvested. His mother also left several baskets of potatoes at the wood's edge that winter. They didn't want any problems from the hairy man, especially since he was known to raid chicken houses. One evening, while he and his father were working in the shop, they heard a long whistle coming from the woods. His father smiled and said, "Don't mind that hairy man is saying thank you." The next spring, they once again went into the woods to hunt. The hairy man had moved on. John P.
I Saw A Wolfman. Hi Mr. Strickler, I have really enjoyed your Phantoms and Monsters ebooks and blog the last few years. I just finished the most recent book, which had a number of dog and wolf humanoid encounters. I like reading these encounters because it makes me feel better to know that there are others out there who have had encounters with something that they can't explain. I decided that I would send you my weirdest story, which happened to me as a child. I have seen and felt strange things since then, but this encounter was both the strangest thing that has ever happened to me, and, I believe, a catalyst for other unusual things in my life and an interest in them. Several years ago, I sent this encounter to another well-known researcher, but I never heard anything back. I'm not surprised, as it is pretty odd and seems made up, but it did happen. What it was, I have no idea. When I was a little girl, my papa lived in an old farmhouse in the upper end of Cleveland County, North Carolina. We used to go visit with him every Saturday. My dad, my mom, my baby brother and I, along with usually several of my dad's brothers, his sister, and their assorted children, would congregate after lunch at Papa's. Us cousins would play together outside and out in the woods, which ran behind my Papa's farm, and stretched for probably 10 miles to a dirt road, beyond which was an apple orchard and a cattle pasture. This was the early 80s in a rural area, back when kids could take off to the woods for hours, and it was okay. We would all have dinner together, and then hang out until bedtime for us kids, when we would all head home. At the time, I had just turned 8. My cousin Jay was 6. My brother and Jay's sister were both small toddlers, barely walking. The night in question, Jay and I and our little siblings were the only kids present at Papa's. He and I had spent the day playing in the woods as usual, and out in the yard where Jay was trying out his prized brand new skateboard. After supper, we hung out in the back bedroom watching TV, until our parents informed us that it was time to go home. Papa's house had a glassed-in porch which also served as a laundry room on the front, right outside the kitchen. This porch, because of the way the lot was laid out and the house was built, was fairly tall, and looking out the windows gave you a panoramic and slightly elevated view of the backyard. I would speculate that the porch windows were about 20 feet off the ground, and the backyard sloped away from the porch. The backyard was lit by 2 large lights, one which was mounted on a pole to the left of the yard, the other mounted on the side of Papa's shop, which was to the right. They were very bright, and each light lit up a fairly large area. The only really shadowy part of the backyard was the area where a large tree stood, casting a shadow that fell between the shop and the greenhouse, which was to the far left of the yard. It was under this tree that Jay had left his skateboard when we stopped playing to eat supper, and he and I decided that we should go out to get it, while our parents were still saying their goodbyes in the kitchen. The Wolfman was in the backyard. We saw him at the same time, as soon as we entered the porch. He was man-sized, and he looked exactly like a werewolf from a bad B-movie. He had a shaggy, dark brown wolfman head with long pointed ears and a lighter brown muzzle. His hands were human-like as best I can remember, though they were covered in dark fur, and he had long claws. He was wearing a red and black check flannel shirt and blue jeans. I don't remember anything about his feet, whether he had shoes or claws, but his legs were straight, like a person's, not bent backwards like a dog. He was walking back and forth in the yard, almost robot-like or as if he were on a track. I can't really describe it well. It was like his legs were moving a little, but not enough to actually count as walking. It was more like he was gliding, but in a jerky way. His body was human in proportion. He would move from the edge of the light near the greenhouse across to the light near the shop, stopping when he reached the end of the illuminated area, and turning around in a strange jerky way and gliding back. His eyes were red and glowed some, like one of those laser lights that you use to tease cats, that color at about that level of brightness. The only time he was out of our sight was when he passed into the shadowed area of the tree. He seemed to be showing off for us, wanting us to see him, or at least that was what it felt like. The feeling that he carried with him was of overwhelming malevolence. I felt like he knew we were there and could see us watching and feel that we were afraid and he was glad. Not sure if that makes sense, but it was what I felt at the time, dread and fear, and like he was aware of us and doing what he was doing on purpose to scare us. Of course, we freaked out and started screaming for our parents. And of course once they all rushed out onto the porch only to hear us hysterical because the Wolfman was in the backyard. They said the usual parent things about overactive imagination and too much Scooby-Doo. Because, even though he was there walking back and forth right in front of them and we could both see him, none of the adults present could. I remember pointing and saying, "It's out there," and being really frustrated because they couldn't see it. Finally, my dad, determined to put an end to the nonsense, announced that he was going to go out into the yard and get Jay's skateboard from under the tree. We tried to stop him, but he went anyway. At that time, the Wolfman was still doing his strange gliding walk back and forth. When my dad opened the porch door and hit the steps that led from the porch to the yard, he triggered the motion sensor light which was on the corner of the porch awning, lighting up the shadow tree area. Just before this happened, the Wolfman had stepped into that shadowy area and disappeared from view in the dark. When the light came on, lighting up the tree area, the Wolfman was just gone. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, as they say. We never saw him again, though we became mildly obsessed with werewolves for a while after that, and started hoarding silver, in case we needed to make silver bullets. When you are a child, it is pretty amazing what you can consider normal. We were scared at the time it happened, but it's like afterwards it didn't feel completely real because it was so bizarre, and we sort of made a game out of it. A few weird things happened to us in the woods after that, but nothing that could be considered paranormal beyond doubt, and nothing like seeing the Wolfman. Years passed, but I always wondered about what we saw that night. My cousin Jay forgot about it altogether. I asked him about it just a few months ago, and he didn't remember it at all. What really brought it back to my memory was the story in Linda Godfrey's Real Wolfman about the girl who saw the hitchhiking werewolf wearing clothes. Before that, I'd never seen a serious report of a canine or lupin humanoid wearing clothes in any publication. I don't often tell anyone about the Wolfman we saw, because it sounds so completely crazy. Of course, my parents and Jay's parents never for 1 second believed we saw anything. I don't fully know the history of the land around Papaws. I know that there were lots of Catawba Indians in that area before colonial times, and that there are several strange formations in that part of the county that people claim are Indian mounds, though none of them seem to be officially recognized as such. There have been several Bigfoot flaps in that county as well, and there are black panthers there. I have seen both black and tan panthers, as has my father and many hunters he knows, though they are not, in my opinion, anything supernatural, just regular animals. I have no idea, to this day, what it was that we saw in the backyard. I find it hard to believe that it was actually a werewolf, but I feel like it was something paranormal. Seeing it caused me to have a lifelong interest in cryptozoology and Fortean phenomenon. I've thought a lot about it, and I sort of feel like John Keel was right when he suggested that there is something out there that messes with us, just because it can. Like maybe something that wanted to be scary, and knew that a stereotypical werewolf would frighten some little kids. I've even wondered if it could have been someone dressed in a costume playing a prank, but that wouldn't explain the weird gliding unnatural way it moved, or the way it was able to disappear so fast, or the fact that apparently 5 adults couldn't see it, even though 2 kids could. Just thought that this might interest you because of the novelty. It sounds so out there, and frankly made up that I doubt anyone would believe it anyway. I have told maybe 4 people my entire life about it, including my ex-husband who did not believe me. I have never even mentioned it to my current husband, because it's just so weird. I would however be interested to know if anyone else out there has experienced anything similar, either a werewolf-type form dressed in clothing, or something that they felt was something, pretending to be something that it really was not. For whatever reason I feel strongly that this is what was happening. I appreciate you taking the time to read this, and have really enjoyed your work. Good luck with your research. KH.
This is Lon Strickler. If you like this program, it would help us if you would give it a thumbs up. Then subscribe and click the bell icon so you get notification when we upload new first-person encounters. We have many more to come very soon. And by the way, if you have a suggestion or an experience of your own, please leave a comment.